Hello, my name is Ann Lindholm, and I co-manage the dog foster program for Austin Pets Alive. And I hate following Ryan and Ellen. I mean, they're amazing. But the good thing is that they have given you an overview of Austin Pets Alive, and I think that's a really good basis for this presentation. One of the things with today, I'm going to go over the development of the dog foster program, and I'm going to talk about some of the lessons that we learned along the way, some of our challenges, our successes. And in terms of lessons learned, I think that the very first one is, if at first you don't succeed, try again. That's certainly been the experience with Austin Pets Alive. As they said, initially we wanted to make Austin no-kill by the millennium. That didn't happen, but that didn't stop people. So we came back and we worked at it again. So don't be disappointed or feel like you can't succeed if it doesn't work the first time around. So the little cutie there is Mick Jagger. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my experience, but I had just started managing the dog foster program, and we got a call that there were 10 3.5-week-old puppies at the shelter that were going to be killed if we didn't take them immediately. We didn't know if they were bottle babies or were eating gruel. So a couple of the rescue people brought them out to my house. We put them out on a tarp. We tried to feed them gruel. They started eating it, and so the two rescue people said, "Okay, we're out of here," and left me with these 10 puppies. After 24 hours, every other hour, getting up, feeding, cleaning, all of that, obsessing over them, afraid that they were going to die. The next morning, I called one of our foster parents, and I said, "Can you please come take 4 of these guys?" And they did. So here's my contact information. Please feel free to contact me afterwards if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer questions out here, but also you can email me or call me after the workshop. So these two guys, the dog on the left was my very first foster dog. That's Max. The dog on the right is my dog Blue, who is now 15 years old. But I started with Austin Pets Alive in 2008. Just about exactly a month after we had pulled our first dog. I had absolutely no experience in animal welfare. I'd never fostered a dog. I'd never done any rescue work. I was just a lifelong animal lover. I was retired from my job. This is something I'd always wanted to do, so I just kind of jumped in full force. And I couldn't figure out at first, I was having trouble really finding out information about APA. Where are your policies and procedures? Where are the staff? Yeah. And so one of the things I asked is that there was a core group of team leaders, about 5 or 6, that were meeting like once a week, what I then learned, trying to get this off the ground. And I just said, can I attend these meetings just to kind of learn more about it? Well, y'all know what happens, right? I mean, if you start attending meetings. So the person that was doing the foster program and really had a great foundation was doing way too much. She was a single parent, working full-time. She was doing the rescue work. She was a board member. And I just said, I said, I'll help you with whatever I can with the foster program. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll help you. Well, about a month into it, Dr. Jefferson said, "So when is Ann taking over the dog foster program?" And I just kind of, when I picked myself up off the floor, kind of said, "Okay." But I think that was the second lesson I learned, is that empower people to do the job. If you expect good things from them, they just might deliver. And I would love to think that Dr. Jefferson looked at me and said, "Oh, she's incredibly talented. She can really do this." But no, it was just, here was a warm body that was showing up, that was willing to put in the time, and she said, "Okay, go with it." So don't be afraid to do that. The other thing that I want to say is that, I attended the volunteer orientation, and the very next day, there were probably just a handful of us in the orientation, and I signed up for fostering. I was willing to try that and just about anything else. The very next day, the person that did the orientation, who also happened to be the rescue person, sent an email out to all of us and said, "I want to save this dog, Max. I cannot, he's going to die. None of our fosters are willing to take him." Nobody else from the volunteer group had come forward. And I was really nervous about it. I had just gone to orientation. I didn't know what I was doing. But the fact that she reached out to me and said, this dog is going to die if you don't do it. And it wasn't I know that sounds really pressure, but it was like, whatever you decide. But that was just enough to kind of push me back past my nerves and say, all right, I'll give him the best shot that I can. And so Max was my first foster dog. I had him for about 3 months. He was a crazy little guy, but he finally found his forever home. Max was a great example of healthy, beautiful dog, but he was black. He wasn't a puppy. And he was a little boisterous, but he was really a good dog. But I mean, at the time, that was enough to be for a death sentence at our city shelter. So that was lesson number 3. If you don't ask, you won't ever know that someone just might say yes. So again, we don't want to push people beyond what they're capable of or what they're really comfortable doing. But sometimes you do have to kind of nudge people. Okay, so initially, as I said, the foster program was just me. That was it. As we started to grow, I realized that I couldn't do this on my own, and so it was necessary to bring on other help. The foster program, within the first couple of years, grew from a one-person operation to a team of 35 volunteers, and we were all volunteers. It was a completely volunteer-based program. And so I hope that what I present to you today will work for those of you that are working with just a one-person foster program, as well as those of you who have a bigger program and who want to grow your program. Just to check in, how many of you are working with an organization that currently has a foster program? For either? Yeah, great. So most of you already have a program in place. That's great. And so again, I hope that I'll give you some ideas for how to grow those programs. For those of you that are just starting out, I hope that this is a plan for you to implement a program. So this is essentially what we're going to cover today. I'm going to kind of give you a program overview. That's probably going to be the largest part of the presentation, because as Ryan said, our goal at this conference is to give you a blueprint where you can walk out of here and say, okay, if I want to do that, I could follow these steps and achieve this. Obviously adapting it where you want, but we want to give you the basics. Then talk a little bit about our priorities, the first steps, what we did and what you need to get started, and then some of our successes, the obstacles, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about oversight of your foster programs. So if there's just one thing that I want you to get out of the workshop today, it is that you can do this. And obviously, most of you have a foster program so that you're already doing it. When I started doing these workshops, a lot of times there were probably only maybe half the people in the room that raised their hand that had foster programs. So that's great. But again, even if you've got a foster program, you can grow it. And for those of you that don't, again, as Ryan said about the conference, don't wait until you have everything perfect. Just jump in and get started, because you can do this. Okay, program overview. I think foster program, just like most people's, it's a temporary living situation for animals in our case, because this is a dog foster program, for dogs while they're waiting placement in a permanent home, or to move into our overnight adoption program, and that's our shelter. So, who needs a foster home? For the first few years, these were the animals that went into foster. That's changed a little bit now, and following this workshop, Faith Wright is going to do a workshop on growing the foster program beyond that and kind of getting to the next group, particularly dealing with the bigger adult dogs that we're getting into our program now. But when we started, these were the only animals that went into foster. So all puppies under the age of 8 weeks. And we spay-neuter at 8 weeks. So basically they went into foster until they could be spayed-neutered and then be adopted out. Sick or injured dogs and puppies. And again, as Dr. Jefferson said, we will keep them in foster, we'll treat them in foster and stuff, but sometimes we don't wait until they're completely healed or completely well to adopt them out. We would make sure that they're at a point that their forever family is capable of providing the care that they need to finish recuperating or getting well. Unvaccinated dogs, obviously, because you don't want them in the shelter. You know, despite your best efforts, disease can be easily transmitted in shelters, so you want to try to keep those animals in a safe environment, a safer environment. And then also the dogs that don't do well at an adoption site. Those are like the little scared dogs, the little chihuahuas and stuff that aren't going to show well at an adoption site. And then also dogs that need a break from the shelter. So at the time, the vast majority of our dogs were coming from our city shelter. And again, as I talked about earlier, they were all being pulled off the euthanasia list. And that was what was unique about Austin Pets Alive, is that we were the only rescue group that had access to that list, that was literally focusing on that. We weren't competing with any other rescue group. We weren't trying to take the dogs that they wanted. We pulled off the list of animals that literally were going to be killed within the next day or two. But in some cases, especially once we got a shelter, which we didn't have at first, there would be some dogs that had been in for a period of time and really needed a break, so we would take those into foster as well. So after a few years, this is kind of what the dog foster team looked like. Now, I will say that's not exactly what it looks like today, because one of the things that I think that you have to be prepared for is to be very fluid with your structure. This changes constantly according to our needs and according to the environment as it changes around us. But this was roughly what it looked like, and I changed these numbers so many times. I hope it adds up to 35. It might be off at 1 or 2 because as I said, these numbers did change a lot. But within the first 3 years, we had a team of 35 volunteers. We had over 1,200 approved foster homes. And, that's a little bit misleading because they weren't all actively fostering, but we had approved that many. And I would say we probably had a couple of hundred that were active fosters at any given time. And we had fostered more than 4,000 dogs at that point. Again, I want to say, I've heard other people say, oh gosh, our program isn't that big. Well, our program wasn't that big at the beginning either. I started out with, I think I had a list of maybe 20 foster home names. Of those, I would say maybe 5 were really, well, actually probably 5 already had a foster animal. Another 5 were, potentially might be able to take a foster dog. And then the other 10 were kind of in the, okay, well, maybe in a last case resort to save an animal, I might be able to take one overnight. So, it was pretty limited, and that's what we started out with. So I'm going to talk more about the individual teams and positions later, but I just want to say a word kind of about the process. It was a really organic process in the structure. In other words, I didn't just start out and say, okay, I think that I'm going to have a placement team and a mentor team and an adoption team. The first thing that I looked at was, so here I was by myself, what were my weaknesses? Where did I need help? And the 2 areas that I needed help, because I didn't have any experience, was the medical and the behavior. So in terms of the behavior, I had a foster parent who, she wasn't a trained behaviorist or anything. She didn't have any credentials, but she was pretty knowledgeable about things like just some basic dog training. House training an animal, doing basic obedience. And so I recruited her I said, can you just work with the foster families that need some help with this? And she said, sure. So she became my first behavior team member. Then at the time, we didn't have a clinic. Dr. Jefferson was our vet, and we did... So we had to, it was all administered under the vet, but we had to have people that would actually administer the vaccines. Well, I was one of those nervous people that I thought I would be the first person in history that would give a vaccine and I'd puncture a lung or something, So I was always very nervous about doing that. So I recruited some vet techs that would do that. So when our foster puppies needed that, they would get it done. Also, if a foster had a fading animal, they would go out and do some basic assessments to try to determine, was this an emergency? We needed to get them in to see Dr. Jefferson right away. So they would just do basic tests, like looking for, does the animal seem to be dehydrated? If they had diarrhea, how did their gums look, and things like that. But again, something that I wasn't really prepared to, so that became my medical team member. Another driving force in recruiting help was simply the workload. When I started out, one of the things, because I was so focused on getting animals out of the shelter and into foster homes, and I know that this is something that any of you that work in foster can absolutely relate to, is that what I was neglecting was bringing on the new fosters, because applications were kind of piling up. Well, if I was faced with, am I going to get this dog out of the shelter, or am I going to call this person and get them approved as a new foster? You knew which one was going to, win out. And so you're caught, it's a real catch-22, because you need those fosters, but you just don't have the time to bring them on. So about this time, and this was fairly early on, I would say maybe 6 months into it, APA held a volunteer fair, and we advertised it to the community that we were this new organization, that we needed help, and we had a pretty good turnout for them. We all went out and poured our souls out to people, and I think my visual was, do you see the bags under these eyes? This woman needs help, But anyway, fortunately, I had 2 people come forward that were willing to work with bringing on new fosters. One of them actually had been experienced. She had worked for a shelter in Chicago, so I immediately made her a team lead. I said, I'm going to turn over the whole process of bringing on new fosters to you. And she was like, okay, no problem. And I'll talk more about that position in detail, but that was just an example of where the timing just worked. That was a need that I had because of the workload, and the people presented themselves. So as we went along, it was basically a matter of, as I identified areas where I needed help, and they were pretty much these, we would generally start out with 1 volunteer. Then as that team grew and we brought on more members, then I would kind of look at that team, and generally there's a person in every team that really kind of seems to be the leader, that seems to be on top of stuff. Sometimes it may just be a matter of, this is the person that has the time to take on the lead. And so then I'd assign team leaders, and at that point, again, it comes back to, I really tried to empower those people, and just basically tried to turn everything, the responsibility for running that program, over to them. And I will say that by the 2nd year, I went from, when I started, I was probably volunteering about 60 hours a week. That was 7 days a week, because I was the only person, and I was fully committed to fosters being able to reach me any time of the day or night. Amazingly, I think in that entire time, I only got 3 calls in the middle of the night from fosters. I still don't know how that happened. But at any rate, I went from that to, I would say by the 2nd year, I was down to volunteering about 20 hours a week, just managing the program, because the teams were so self-sufficient. So I think that, and once you do that, you all know that doesn't just give you free time. It means that it's opened up time for you to do other things. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. The other thing, I think the other good thing about the teams and the positions is that when you do this, instead of having somebody responsible for every aspect of the foster program, when you break it down, you make it a more manageable position. And for us, as I'm sure is true with most of you, our volunteers on the foster team have families, they work full-time. They didn't have the 60 hours a week that I did to give to the program. So if you make it kind of a smaller piece, then it's a little bit more manageable. It's also easier to train for. People only have that responsibility to know that one piece of their job. So that was basically our team approach, and I was on a flight to Utah, and I was reading, it was a Southwest Airlines, and I didn't have anything along, so I was reading the Spirit magazine, right? But I came across something that just really struck me, because I think people generally see Southwest Airlines as a pretty successful business model. And there was an article entitled "The Power of Teamwork," and I think it was the president or one of the executives that said, they attributed the success of Southwest Airlines to teamwork, said it demonstrates what can be accomplished when a team of 46,000 employees pulls to deliver on a common purpose. And that just really struck a chord with me, because that was exactly the truth of Austin Pets Alive. It's like what this organization could deliver by harnessing the teamwork. And I have truly come to believe that anything is possible when you harness the compassion in your community and utilize teamwork to accomplish your mission. And I will tell you, in every community, I don't care how small your community is, there are passionate people that want to be involved in this work and want to join in your success. Okay, so the dog foster manager. I think it's very important as soon as you can to have somebody that can take over complete responsibility of your foster program. So if you're an executive director or something that's trying to do the foster program with everything else, as soon as possible, try to get somebody that you can pass this off to. And in our case, it was even divided into the dog and cat. So we had a dog foster manager and a cat foster manager. I think the reasons are pretty obvious besides just the workload issue. Having somebody that can focus solely on this is important. Again, it goes back to, it wasn't that I was a genius about, creating teams of this program. It was that I had the ability to focus on this one task. So I think, try to do that. And then secondly, once you have someone in place in any position, start bring on a backup. Have somebody to shadow that person, and start training your replacement. For one thing, if somebody leaves, you've got somebody that's prepared to step in. And also, people occasionally want to take vacations. It's nice to have somebody that can take over for that person. Okay, so the new dog foster team. This is a very misleading title. At one point in our development, we decided we wanted to have everything be the same across the dog and cat programs because we'd all come up with our own titles and everything, and we were trying to be more consistent. So this is the team that brings on new fosters, that processes applications from people who are interested in becoming fosters. Well, somehow the only thing that we could agree on was new dog foster team, people, or new foster team. So at any rate, so I talked about this being one of the first positions that I recruited for. Some of the things that I want to cover as important lessons learned, because as I said, I think this piece was really critical. The first is that wherever possible, have a web-based system. We started out with paper applications, and I tell you, I had 3-ring binders with applications stacked up, in my house. I mean, if my house had burned down or something had happened to me, nobody in APA would have any information on any of these people. So fortunately, we began working, and I would say it was probably within about a year, we were able to implement a web-based system. So besides the fact that you have information that's put into a database that everybody can, or at least your team can access, the other benefit to it is that when you've got somebody that's browsing the internet in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, when they come across our web page and they start looking at fostering and think, gee, I want to do that. If they can click on and fill out an application right then, you're more likely to engage them than if they have to, wake up the next day, remember that that's what they want to do, maybe drive to the shelter, fill out a paper application. It's just, you're going to lose people along the way. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that for us, what it enabled us to do, I mean, again, initially, I would have to get the application to the person, have them fill it out, get it back to me, all before they could even start fostering. Now with our system, the team lead, we use Zoho, and we used that because it was free at the time. I'm not sure if it still is to nonprofits, and I would just like to add a plug. If anybody is using a system out there that works for them, please email me. I'd like to identify some of the programs that are working for you. Zoho actually has worked very well for us on the foster program. We used it on the volunteer side, and I guess there were some issues with that, but for us, it's been really good. What happens is that when somebody submits an application, the lead gets an email with all of that information. So they can forward that email to a team of screeners that will then contact that foster. They do a phone interview. We don't do any home visits. And so that the purpose of that interview is to get we review the application, we have some questions, and then it's also informational. We tell them more, answer their questions about fostering, tell them a little bit more about it. And then that person sends that information back to the team lead who approves it and gets them in our system. The other thing that going to a web-based system allowed us to do is that initially, in addition to the paper application, we also had a paper contract. And this is the legalese that you have for your fosters. And if anybody out there is not doing some sort of a contract with your foster parents, I strongly encourage it. It's so helpful to be able to go back to something and say, this is what you agreed to. So initially, we had this paper agreement, and it had to be filled out for every single foster dog. So we couldn't even do it just, okay, the first time you're fostering, you're signing this. It had to be done on everyone. Quite honestly, at first, they wanted it filled out on every single puppy in a litter. Well, I immediately said, oh, no, this is covering the whole litter, you know. The other thing is that, again, remember, we were under time constraints. We often had to have an animal pulled within 24 hours. Well, you can imagine if I'm having to I find this person that's willing to take it, then I've got to get this paper to them, get them to sign it before they can even go pick up the dog. And Austin is not a small town, as you've noticed, so it was truly impossible. One of the things that I did pretty early on, and to be honest, I didn't even ask permission. It was one of those where I'm not going to ask permission. I'm going to, ask for forgiveness later. And because I would email the document to them, and I would say, just read this, write back to me that you've read this document and you agree to the terms, and we went with that. That worked pretty well. There was one occasion, of course, the only time where we ever needed this agreement, I could find the one that I had sent to the foster, and the one that the foster had signed for the foster dog they'd had before. I could find the one where they signed it for the foster dog after. I could find where I'd sent it to them, but I could not find where they responded. And I thought, well, there is a lesson here that even though I've been so careful about this, the one time that I needed the one back from them, we didn't have it. So that was when I went to Dr. Jefferson and Ryan. It was our legal advice at the time, and said, I really think that we need to attach this to our application. It may not be considered quite as good as having a signed statement on every dog, but it's going to be more. It's going to be more of a sure thing. So we added this language to our application, and if you go on our website and go to the foster section, you can click on our foster application, and so you can see the exact language that we've got there. Don't worry, you can click on that application. It doesn't mean you're signing up to foster until you submit it. But again, if you want to sign up to foster, that's okay too. So that was really, that was a huge sea change for us. And so again, I would say if you have that ability, skip all those headaches that we had, go right to a system like that. The other thing, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, to me, customer service was paramount in the foster program. I just really felt that we needed these people. We needed to do everything we could to make this a good experience for our foster parents. And it basically starts at the point when they're applying. And for what that means at this point is that, one, will be timely. We try to reach out within 24 hours of getting that application to do the interview. Actually, we try to do it within a matter of hours, but at least within 24 hours. And we don't always meet that, but that's our goal. And again, part of that is that you want to get people at the point that they're excited and enthusiastic about it. And then the other thing that we do is once we get them signed up, we try to get them a foster dog as soon as possible. Again, you don't want to lose that momentum. The other thing that we do is we try to express our appreciation. So even at that first phone call, we thank them for reaching out to us. And we, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but we rarely, in fact, I don't think that we have ever denied somebody at the point of the interview. There have been times where in talking with this person, you kind of come to a mutual agreement that fostering is not a good fit for them. It might be someone that works too many hours. It might be somebody that has not really looked into it and they realize that, no, they have restrictions where they're living and they can't have, but for whatever reason they don't. You know, if that happens, we thank them very much for their support of Austin Pets Alive. We try to refer them to another volunteer program. And again, it's just, we really don't want it to be an adversarial. We want them to understand how much we appreciate their interest in saving the homeless animals in our community. Okay, the other thing that I want to say, because I think we're a little different from what some other rescue groups do, as I said, we don't do home visits. We no longer do reference checks. We started doing that, and it was, we never ever got information from a reference check that was going to keep us from approving this person. some of you may have had other experiences. It's been our experience that when somebody gives you 2 or 3 names and says these are references, those people are not going to tell you, oh, don't give them an animal. You know, they're going to say, oh yeah, they'd be great. They're very responsible. Again, that was just our experience. So we quit doing them. It was the biggest waste of time, and it was the primary reason for delaying getting applications approved. Because if you have to get off the phone and make contact with other people and then wait for them to call you back, and they may not call you back because they really don't know who you are, even though you said that you're with Austin Pets Alive. So that really helped us approve applications much quicker, and it did not make any difference in terms of, you know, we didn't have any more problems with the foster parents that we got because we didn't do reference checks. The one thing that we did do is we do a Google check, and that's basically we just type the name into Google, we kind of glance through what comes up, and the main reason for that is just doing a certain amount of due diligence. The main thing is that we don't want to, you know, be surprised, because if you type in this person's name, you're going to see that, well, they were just charged with hoarding or for animal abuse in another community. So it's mainly just looking to see, is there something egregious that's popping up out there that we just want to make sure that we're aware of. Basically, I can sum up our experience with this by saying that our approach from the very beginning was that we don't think that people come to become a foster parent because they want to harm an animal. It's too much work. If you want to do that, there are too many other ways that are easier to do it. We feel that and it has been our experience, that people that are coming to us want to do the right thing. So we've taken the approach of being inclusive. Let's bring these people on board. It's our responsibility to help them be a successful foster parent. And as I said, that has worked for us. Okay, dog foster placement. So this is the team, and in fact, we have a member of that team in the room here today. This is the team that's responsible for intaking dogs into the foster program. So initially, as I said, we had our rescue program was a team of 2 people that were on site at the shelter. They were calling me and then the placement team and saying, okay, I've got X, Y, and Z dog, can you find, and I'd try to find a foster, and then we'd match them up. Now it's a little bit broader. They get calls from our program manager, who's going to be presenting after me. But they're the ones that are responsible for finding the foster home that's going to take this animal in, for giving them the information to pick up that animal, that dog, and making sure that it's an appropriate match, and facilitating their move into foster care. So some of the lessons that we learned for this team. The first is that, and this is the way we were set up from the beginning, is that I think it's very important to have the team that is actually doing the rescue work or evaluating those dogs separate from the team that is doing the foster placement. And there's several reasons for this. The first is simply workload. Again, with our rescue team initially, they had a couple of hours at the shelter every night to go through and assess every dog. They simply didn't have the time to sit down and reach out to foster parents, to find a match. The second thing is that I think it's important to have that line, because it's important to be able to push back a little bit if you don't have an appropriate foster. We all struggle very hard to never leave an animal behind at the shelter, but you don't ever want to be in a position where you're really putting a dog in an unsafe position, and you're jeopardizing that foster because they're really not prepared to deal with this situation. And I think that, if you're the person that's doing that rescue work and you're looking that animal in the eyes, it's just human nature to maybe push a little bit more and just being a little bit more removed. Although I have to say, our team is just amazing. I can't tell you the lengths that they go through to place the dogs, and we've had it's extremely, extremely rare that we ever are not able to find a foster ultimately for an animal. But anyway, so having that delineation, I think, is a good thing. The other thing is that it's important to have a way to reach all of your fosters. And again, for us, because we were under a time constraint, we had to be able to reach them very quickly. So we set up, we invited them to an email group. We started out with Yahoo, and then we encountered some problems. So since then, we've changed to Google. But it doesn't matter which one you use, but just using an email group. So what happens is that when we have a need for a foster, we send that plea out to all of them. We don't make judgments. We don't think, oh, I think that this person might take this, because you never know that there might be someone out there that's willing to do this. And then also it's more time consuming to do that. So if you can just broadcast this out, see who comes forward, and then make sure that that's an appropriate match, that works. I think that works better. I touched on this a little bit. You need to make sure that match is appropriate. You need to make sure that if that foster has little kids, that you're not placing, like for example, we don't like to place the little scaredy dogs with foster families that have little kids. It's just, that's just a recipe for disaster, and it's nobody's fault. It just is. And then also, it's very important that you have a clear protocol or process for them picking up the animals. And this is particularly true. It's one thing if they're going to be coming in to your shelter and picking up directly from you, then it's not quite as problematic. But in our case, in most cases, they were picking up from our local city shelter. And, I think anytime you're dealing with another entity, you want to be very respectful of their time. And also, in our situation, we really wanted to make sure that we didn't mess this up. This was a new thing. We didn't want the city staff or the city shelter getting upset with us, but because our fosters didn't know what they were doing, and say, well, look, we're just not going to work with you anymore. So make sure that they understand. And then the other thing is you don't want your foster parents to be in that position where they just kind of show up going, well, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do, but I think I'm here to pick up a dog. So have very clear protocols. And then the other thing is you need to have a system in place to let you know if something happens and they can't pick up that dog. Again, going back to quite often, our fosters were picking up the animals in the last hours of their life. If they did not get to, and Dr. Jefferson mentioned this earlier, if they did not get there by 7 o'clock when the shelter closed, we had no way of reaching anyone in the shelter. That dog was going to be killed before 11 o'clock in the morning. And things happen. Cars break down, kids get sick, but we really tried to instill in people that if this happens, you need to call us. You need to let somebody know so that we can get someone over that can get that dog. Okay, so the next team, the dog foster mentor. This is kind of the heart and soul of the support of foster parents. These are the people that that the foster parent kind of goes to for most things while they're fostering the animal. They schedule all the medical care, all the vaccines, the surgeries, any medical care. If there's a behavior issue, they'll hook that person up with the behavior team. And it's also because this area really needed to be the most knowledgeable of everything. I mean, they needed to know a little bit about behavior. They needed to know all the medical stuff. They needed to know how to deal with the foster that's panicking because they've got a sick dog. So initially, I had one person who was great at this, stepped in and did it, and then unfortunately, she found a full-time job. So we had to bring in some other people. So we created the team. Initially, what we did is we just assigned by dog. So when a new dog came in, it was kind of round robin to these people. But she continued to take more of them. We quickly found that wasn't really working. It was very inequitable. The mentors that might just have a few animals just never got as comfortable with the position or as knowledgeable. So what we went to, and this is something that we've applied now to our other teams as well, is, again, we went to a team approach. And there were two things that we needed in order to make these teams, the team approach work. The first was a group email. So what we did is we created, for the mentors, it's dog-foster-coordinator at Austin Pets Alive. So we created this one email that fosters would reach out to, and then the team all can sign on to this email. Before then, it was they were getting individual mentors or their individual email. Well, when that mentor leaves, that foster might still have that email and be trying to contact that person. So one, it really helped with continuity. And then the second is that it helped with the coverage. Because now, instead of having to make sure that individuals are available 24 hours a day to this foster, you now have a team. So for example, the way we're currently set, we happen to have 2 amazingly committed people. They are actually dividing it up. So one primarily takes days, the day shift throughout the Monday through Friday, and the other one covers evenings and weekends. And so they both share the email. They'll come in, the next day and look at, or that evening, and look at what the person has done before and all of that. They know when they're supposed to respond. The other thing from a management standpoint that helps is that if something happens, if one of them is sick or something, it's very easy to step in. I can say, oh, I've got to go on to the mentor email today to cover for this person. So that's worked really well, and we've really replicated that in all of our teams now. All of them have a unique email address that they use. The second thing is that we had to have an easy way to share general information about all of the dogs in foster. Again, when it was just me, no problem. I knew all the fosters, I knew all the dogs, I knew all the policies and procedures, no problem. But once you start, dealing with so many people, you need to have a way to share that information. We use PetPoint as our official database for all of our animals, but it's not very user-friendly in terms of like doing a quick glance at who you have in foster. The other thing is that is simply from a security standpoint, anytime you've got an official database, the fewer people that you have that are going into that database, the better off you are. So I had one of my, again, it's somebody on my team, I was explaining what the issue was, what she needed, and she came up with a Google spreadsheet. I just thought it was, the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now, of course, I'm totally familiar with Google spreadsheets. I love them, but at the time, it was just like, oh my God, what have you created here? But it was perfect for us because it could be shared. It's very simple. It shows, the name of the dog, their ID number, their date of birth, their sex, whether or not they've been spayed or neutered, the date they came into our program, why they're here, when their surgery date is, if an adoption is pending. So everybody on the team can see that information, and each team is responsible for entering information on a certain part of it. Not only does the foster team have access to it, Dr. Jefferson has access to it, our Adopt line has access to it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that so people can go in and see. So this is something where you can give everybody in the team access to this limited information without, kind of potentially endangering your full database with that. Let's see. Okay, so I think so as I said, just those 2 things really allowed us the opportunity to have a successful team approach. Okay, the dog foster donated resource coordinator. This is a good example of a position that we don't have any longer. But I included it because I talked about, kind of creating teams or bringing on somebody to help because of workload or because it was a really critical area that I needed help in. The other thing was I looked for things that were taking up my time that might be easy to pass off to somebody. And this was one of them. We provide all the medical care for our foster dogs, but foster parents have to provide everything else. They have to provide the food, treats, beds, all of that stuff. So every once in a while we would have food donated, and I would try to coordinate getting that to foster parents. Well, initially that meant that I had to go drive to where the donated food was, and why it always has to be delivered in 50-pound bags, I don't know, but it is. So I would pile those 50-pound bags in my car, and then, when their foster needed it, I would go deliver it to them, and, you can just kind of see by my size, that was not a good thing. So we had a foster parent who was just a great guy and, really helpful and everything, and I thought, I wonder if he would be willing to take this on. So I asked him, I said, would you be willing to just handle all of this, And he said, sure. So he took it on. And again, it wasn't something that took up a great amount of time, or, overall. But like when it happened, when I had to go pick it up or deliver it, that was a pretty good chunk. So for me to just be able to hand that off and not even have to worry about it freed up a lot of time. And so for any of you that are responsible for more, I encourage you to look for what are those little things that you can just get off your plate. Because I think too often we have a tendency to say, oh, I can do that. That's just not, it doesn't take up that much of my time. But when you add up all those little things, it takes up a huge chunk of your time. Now that we have a shelter, it's a little bit easier for us to take in and distribute those things. So we really haven't needed that position anymore. So again, that's where I said you're very flexible in terms of like what you develop and then sometimes those positions go away. So another really important team is our dog foster adoption team. This is the group within the foster program that works with the fosters to get their dogs adopted. It assists with all aspects of that. We went through a kind of a philosophical change within this program too. Initially, our focus, because we had dogs in foster, we had a very small shelter program, and then almost all of our dogs were going out to adoption sites every day. And so initially, our motive was that we have to get our foster dogs into those adoption programs as soon as we can. So that meant when a puppy turned 8 weeks, it would go to surgery, then it would go into the shelter, and it would go out to the adoption, usually within 1 or 2 days, the puppies would get adopted. So our focus was just on getting them out to the adoption team. Well, then we turned that around and we said, wouldn't it really be better if we could actually get them adopted out of foster? So then our goal became, we're going to try to get as many dogs as possible adopted directly out of the foster home. So with our puppies now, what we do is that the vast majority of them are pre-adopted. But we post them to our web at about 7 weeks. So for that week, between 7 and 8 weeks roughly, sometimes if they don't get surgery right away, it might be like 10 days or something, is when we really market them. The foster does meet and greets with the foster parents, and if we've got a good match, we set them up they do a pre-adoption, so they do everything. They go through the application, they pay the money, and then they will pick the puppy up directly from surgery. So the great thing about this is that foster parents are much happier with it because they're involved. They're seeing the person that their foster puppy is going to. It's great for the animals because they're staying in foster care until they go to their forever home. They're never even having to go into the shelter. And then thirdly, it's a workload issue. If we are able to take care, and our goal is to get 100% of our animals adopted out of foster. That'll probably never happen, but that's still out there as our goal. Because the more that we can do that, the more room we're leaving at our adoption sites for our shelter animals to get out there and get adopted, and it allows us to continue saving more. Okay, again, when we initially started, because we did have this model of as soon as animals were eligible, they would go out to adoption sites. So let's say that an animal didn't get pre-adopted or adopted quickly. The expectation of the foster parent was that once they were able to go to an adoption site, that foster parent would take them out to an adoption site every day. And for the first 3 months, I drove Max out to the adoption site every single day. I usually helped the counselor set up, break it down and stuff. We had some flexibility, but we were pretty hard-nosed about that. We had foster parents that would go home at lunch, take their foster dog out to the adoption site, and then pick them up afterwards. At that point, we had pretty quick turnover of our animals. And when I first started doing this workshop, people were saying to me, "Well, what do you do about the animals that get kind of sit in foster?" And I said, "Really, we don't have much of that." I will say that now that our program has gotten bigger and we're taking on more of the bigger dogs, and we also don't have as much access to the adoption sites, we're now facing some of those same challenges that some of you are. So that's something that we're working on right now. But I do think that if you're in a position, I think that, and we also really brought our fosters on board with the concept, our mission, our goal is saving lives. And so, we don't necessarily want this foster dog bonding with you. We want this foster dog bonding with their forever family. Let's get them into their forever home as soon as possible. That makes more room in your home, or more space in your home for an animal, and also moves them through more quickly. Let's see. And that's a real kind of gentle push-pull. We obviously we need our foster parents. We don't want to push people too hard, but you do sometimes have to kind of work with people and nudge them a little bit to, we can't wait for what you think is the perfect home. Let's go with the really good home that's here. Okay, again, this is an area where it's really important that you have a clear process and protocol, especially for your adoption procedures. I would say at the beginning, the one area that I dealt with the most complaints from were people that wanted to adopt, and it was generally the puppies, and they were disappointed because maybe the foster parent had invited 5 or 6 families over to meet this litter of puppies, and everybody went away with the idea that they were going to be able to adopt that same puppy. And I can't tell you, night after night of a family saying, "My kids are crying nonstop. They thought they were going to get little Joey, and now they can't." that I said, okay, we've got to come up with some really, kind of strict policies. So one of the things that we said is limit, your meet and greets to like, let's do 2 people at a time. Let's deal with these first 2 that come in, and then if those don't seem to work out, then we'll go on to the next. The second thing is that when the adopt line, and I'll talk more about that later, but when they get an inquiry and they send that to the foster and say, we've got, this person is interested in your foster dog, the letter that goes out to that person immediately states that they need to be aware that this dog, that an adoption may be pending, that the dog may not still be available. So we really try to set that expectation. But I think that having those protocols in place has really helped, and we eliminated, 99% of those complaints and concerns. And I think the other thing with that is that when you've got that clear protocol, people don't feel like you're just making adoption decisions based on a judgment of them. There are clear reasons. It's pretty much first come, first served to begin with, and then we're very upfront with you that there may be other people, and then once we do have a potential adopter, we stop taking other referrals on that until we see whether or not that adoption absolutely goes through. Okay, special events team. We from the very beginning received a lot. We had an excellent marketing person, and I really, that is so important for any organization. But we were very fortunate that people in the community wanted to highlight the work that we were doing and have special events, and of course, they always wanted puppies and dogs. Well, at the time, because of the way our shelter is set up and stuff, it was hard to get animals from our shelter out to these events. That's still true today, so really they came to the foster program for that. And the good thing for us is that it was also a way to kind of showcase some of our foster animals. So that was a great thing. We really tried to do that. So we came up with a special events team, and their responsibility was to coordinate getting foster dogs out to these events. That included making sure that they were medically and behaviorally appropriate for that event. The other thing is that they were to make sure that that foster parent was going to have help at that event. Our marketing team was very good about having volunteers there for the event, but not necessarily there for the foster parent. And you need to have someone that can run and get water if they need it, or maybe hold on to the dog while the foster parent goes to the bathroom, or help with crowd control if it's puppies, make sure that everybody's sanitizing in between. So that was what this team really started with. Recently, and again, this is an example of how things changed, we're taking this team and we're adding another aspect, and they're going to be doing some more adoption advocacy, where they're really working more one-on-one with some of our foster parents to identify those dogs and find out, why isn't this dog getting adopted? What can we do to help you? So again, just an example of how even within this team, it's changing a little bit. Okay, dog foster recruiter. This is an example, again, of a position that we had, and at one point we had an entire team that we don't have any longer. It's not that we don't want to have it, it's just, things happen, we kind of lost these people. I will say Austin Pets Alive has been very fortunate in that we do have a steady stream of people coming forward wanting to foster for us. And again, a lot of that I credit with our marketing. And I think that with the marketing, and this is something that you can do in your community as well, as Dr. Jefferson and Ron Clinton said earlier, once we got the word out there, what we were doing, and that people could see that we were making a difference, it was just like that video. The one person came up and everybody started coming forward because they wanted to come on board. They wanted to be part of the success. So one of the things that really worked for us was just the adoption sites themselves, that people would come see us out there in the community and come up. Maybe they weren't ready to adopt, but the adoption counselor would tell them about fostering. We also go to all of our volunteer orientations, and we do have a person that's doing that now, so that's kind of our limited recruiting. We've tried throughout the years to recruit specialized fosters, and these are people to do medical and behavioral. We really have never had much success in specifically recruiting for those two. So again, if anybody has a program that's worked really well for you in that area, let me know. What we have found is that when we have fosters that do those and they're successful, that's what they want to do. If you're a medical foster and you've done a good job on it, you're usually hooked. You want to do more medical fosters, and the same with the behavior. So one of the things that we did with that, and I want to give an example of a dog, we had a very sad story. A dog that was, as far as we could tell, was thrown out of a moving car on an overpass, fell to the road below, and was hit by a car. And we got the call from the city. I wasn't doing the applications, but I'd stepped in and I was helping, and I just happened to talk to this woman that morning and approved her as a new foster. So when the call came in on this one, I thought, I wonder if she would be willing to take this one. Again, it was that theory of get a dog to them as soon as possible. So I called her back and I explained the situation, and obviously she was a little nervous. Again, this is much more than me taking on Max day one. But she said she was willing to give it a try, and so I gave her all of the information, got off the phone with her. The next phone call was that the local media had gotten a hold of this story, and they wanted to do an on-camera interview with the foster at the shelter. So I had to call this brand new foster back and say, well, how do you feel about an on-camera interview with the local news? And she, it's kind of, but she said, okay. So they took Flash in. They fostered Flash through a couple of surgeries, and what do y'all think happened? Exactly, foster fail, big time. There's a picture of Flash later that I'm going to point out to you, but I think, and this still gives me chills every time I think, the foster dad was in the military, and not long after they got Flash, he was deployed overseas. One night, he was barking, which he never did at night. It was a very different bark. She got up, and she went back, and she saw that the sliding glass doors had been jimmied. Somebody had been trying to get in, called the police. The police came out. They caught somebody in the neighborhood that was trying to break in. And he said that Flash was the guardian angel that was sent to their family to protect them when he was overseas. It was just, and I thought that's just an example of these are the animals that we're saving. Sorry. So at any rate, that was, when you get that word out in the media. Now in this case, we didn't find her through that, but there have been other cases where we had a really serious case like this that we've taken to Craigslist or has gone out to the media, and then a foster has come forward. The other thing, make lemonade out of lemons. Another kind of tragic situation that we had several years ago, we had massive wildfires in central Texas. Some of you may be in a community where this happens more often. It's rare for us. This was a huge thing. It was devastating. And so, of course, what happened is that a lot of people had to leave their homes really quickly. So if they had an outdoor cat, they didn't have time to get their cats. If they had livestock, horses and stuff, they didn't have time to get their animals out. If they were away from home, they couldn't get back into their home to get their animals. It was horrendous. And in fact, Dr. Jefferson and our rescue people were a couple of the first people that were allowed back into that site to go look for animals. And so we, again, because of the media, we had an outpouring of people wanting to foster animals. That first week, we received over 200 applications for people to be dog fosters, and we approved over 100 in 1 week. And we did that because when this was happening, it was all hands on deck. I stepped in with the lead and said, okay, I'm going to help you manage this. We called everybody who had ever screened applications for us. We said, can you come back and help us? The people that were currently screening, we said, can you do more than you usually do? And like I said, that's how we were able to approve that many. Now what happened is that we didn't actually wind up fostering those animals. What we wound up doing is that we took animals from those shelters that were affected, and we brought those in because then that freed up their room so the animals that were found in those communities could be brought to those shelters so people could look in their community. They didn't have to drive to Austin to see, do you have my dog or cat? So, and that was one of the things we told people as we were going through. You may not get a Bastrop Fire dog, but by doing this, you're helping them out, and people did that. And, a lot of those people dropped off after this, but we had some that stayed on to foster. So I think that the lesson with that, have a plan. Be prepared. What are you going to do if a situation happens, be it natural disaster or something like Katrina, as mentioned earlier? What would you do? How would you meet that need? And the other thing, the flip side of recruitment is retaining your existing fosters. And the bottom line there is do everything you can to keep good fosters. Remember that you can't do this without them. And, I think that we're only human, and it's very easy to sometimes jump on that, oh my God, I can't believe this person did this, or, oh, this person is a terrible foster. I think one of the advantages for me of being so inexperienced is, and in fact, I had an incident with Max at first where something happened. I won't take the time to go into it. I, of course, reached in to help him. What happened? I got bit. I called Dr. Jefferson, brand new. Of course, I wanted her to say, oh, I'll be right over it. Yeah, no, you got to figure out how you're going to get this dog to me. But at any rate, I knew that I wasn't trying to be stupid. I wasn't trying to do something dumb. And so that's the case with our foster parents. And we're all human, and things happen. Things happen with our own personal animals. So we just have to remember that and, kind of work with them, forgive them. If they can't be trained, well, then that's a different story. Let's see. Oh, just the other thing on fosters, we did a variety of things. We had a newsletter at one point. We tried to do meetups. All of those things are really good, and if you can do them, that's great. We struggle with that because we're such a large program, and again, it's kind of taking time from it, but we still would like to do more of that, so I think that's a good thing. So recruitment success. I talked earlier about kind of the best recruitment has been just the success and reputation of the organization. But that is something that you have power over. What is it that your organization is doing that's good? Get that word out to the community, and they'll want to be a part of it. I talked about the importance of off-site adoptions, and I also talked about this, that, animal lovers are everywhere and want to help. Okay, other support. So everything up until now has been the team within the dog foster program, but we have a lot of support from outside of ours. The two that the behavior and medical are obviously very critical, and those are two examples where initially some of that was inside the foster program, and then as we grew, that went out. My behavior person that was helping, when we had a behavior team, she got pulled over into that. The other thing I want to say about medical is initially, I'll cover that. I'll cover that later, actually. So then the other outside, talked about the offsite adoptions. Marketing, not only is there an APA marketing, we have a dog and a cat fostering team. They're the ones that get photos of the animals, that help get bios, get videos. They're just, it's amazing. We have data management, and in fact, Lindsay's going to be doing a workshop on data and the importance of it on Sunday. I highly recommend that. And then we have an adopt line, and this is in addition to the adopting within our program. This adopt line deals with when people go on our website and you're interested in adopting an animal, send an email, it goes to this group, and they're responsible for hooking them up with us. So we're very fortunate, but again, remember, we started out that one person, that one vet, that one adoption site. Okay, so that's in essence kind of our program. So I want to go on to program priorities. I think it was after the first year, Dr. Jefferson came to all of the managers and team leads and said, okay, what are your priorities? What do you want to do for next year? So I looked at it and I said, okay, I think for me, everything boils down to this. We want to provide the best possible care for each dog. We want to support our foster parents, and we want to move dogs through as soon as possible. I was so proud of this. And I went to her and I showed her, and she looked at it and she said, well, what about saving lives? And I said, oh, well, yeah, that's kind of the primary priority. So absolutely, number one is saving lives. And all of these things supported every decision that I made about our policies and protocols. Every time I was, implementing a policy or a regulation or asking fosters to do something, I would come back and I would look at these things and say, is this policy going to contribute to saving lives? Is it promoting the best possible care? Is it supporting the foster parent? And is it supporting getting that animal through as soon as possible? Okay. So the best possible care for each dog. Number one, again, as was talked about earlier, it's the moral, ethical, right thing to do for the dog. Secondly, it improves the chance for adoption. So if you've got a dog that's got a little bit of a behavior issue, or even if they don't, if you do obedience work with that, or if it's a behavior issue that you work on, you're making that dog more adoptable. In terms of health, obviously, the more that you do to get that animal well, they're becoming more adoptable. But again, as Dr. Jefferson says, that doesn't mean you don't market them. And I tell you, we have had, I know you've seen them, some of the little Demodex dogs that come through that just look so pitiful, and you think nobody's going to want to adopt them. especially, I tell you what, you put a cute little costume on, they're out of there, you know. So, so we do that. And then I call it good PR for the organization, but it's really the reverse. It's avoiding bad PR. You know, nothing is worse than sending a behavior case home in a forever family where that home is not prepared to deal with those issues. Same thing with medical care. If you send an animal home that is not, again, that's not to say that we don't, but we make sure that that adoptive family knows what is needed to continue that care, that they have a plan in place that's going to continue that. Okay, whoops, here we go. Foster parents are supported. And what that means is that, first of all, providing the training and resource materials that enable them to provide good care to their foster. Remember back to what I said earlier where I said it's our responsibility to make them be successful. I will say that we do very little in terms of training. It's really pretty much everything is through email. We would love to do classroom training. That's what we're working towards. Right now it's primarily you get email information. In terms of support, our team, we want to be available, appreciative, and understanding. Dogs are moved through as soon as possible. Remember I talked about Flash? That is Flash. Flash wearing his life jacket out on the paddleboard on Town Lake. So he is happy, healthy dog. So we think it's in the best interest of the dogs, and it means that we can save more dogs. When I had first started, it was actually the precursor for the conference. We had a one-day symposium here, and I remember I spoke to, or one of a national leader, I'm trying to find my quote here, spoke, and she said something that just stuck with me throughout all this. She said, time is space, time is life. Every day that a dog doesn't get out of foster, a dog could be dying at the shelter, and that is just the honest truth. Okay, I'm going to try to go through this pretty quick. So, first steps. These are just things that you've got to have in place before when you're starting out a program. You've got to have some sort of an application agreement. You've got to have some resource materials for them. And ours initially was basically just general care. Over the years, we developed a handbook that really gets into our protocols and procedures. That was what I could get to writing once I wasn't having to deal with the rest of the day-to-day stuff. You have to have a means to provide medical care. Initially, we contracted out all of our spay-neuters, you have to have some system for getting them adopted, and you've got to, of course, have at least a core group of foster parents as well as a means to communicate with them. Our successes. In the first 3 years, over 3,300 dogs and puppies fostered. I already kind of addressed this, over 1,200 approved foster parents, and Austin achieved no-kill status 4 years ago. We're celebrating our anniversary this weekend. How we did it, talked about this. We developed these teams. Our foster parents share our passion, good customer service, and believing we can. And I just want to say one thing about this that just credit Dr. Jefferson. She, I think, is the originator of the term, yes, we can. All apologies to President Obama. Everything that came back when we had something that stood in our way, she just didn't accept that. It was just, yes, you can. Another example, when we were planning for the following year, and she said, what do you have to do to double what you did this year? And I came up with a plan, and one of them was, we need to have a paid staff person. I said, I'm not angling for a job, but really, in order to have the continuity, and she said, well, just take that off the table. You can't do it. So I did, and we doubled. It was just so that is her, and she sets that tone for the organization. Lessons learned, I kind of touched on these. At first you don't succeed, try again. Don't be afraid of a lack of knowledge or experience in yourself or others. Empower people, ask, they might just say, delegate, and give up control. Okay, great. Program challenges. It is difficult with an all-volunteer structure. I have to say we've been very fortunate. Our volunteers have been very committed and stayed. They far exceed kind of the national averages for volunteers sticking with the program. But that is difficult. As the program grows, keeping the fosters and team members trained and informed and singing out of the same hymnal, as they said, is a challenge. You just have to constantly work at that with communication. And the turnover of foster parents and volunteers just requires ongoing recruitment and training. That's just going to be something you just have to keep doing. Okay, real quickly, I just want to say a little bit about oversight and tracking. We developed performance measures from the very beginning They help guide you. They make sure you're going in the right direction to meet your goals. And I think, again, I think Faith Wright is going to talk about more of this in the next workshop. It's also critical to track all of your dogs in foster care. So again, not only do we have Pet Point, but again, that spreadsheet, every day we're looking at where those animals are. You've got to know where the animals are in your program. Once in a blue moon, we'd reach out and find, all of a sudden we hadn't had contact with a foster for a couple of weeks, and lo and behold, it turns out that they did this unofficial adoption to their neighbor, But, in general, we've avoided that. You really have to stay on top of that. These were the performance measures that we had. The number of approved dog foster homes, the number of active fosters, and that's defined as someone who had a foster dog at least one day that month, the number of dogs in foster, and the number of dogs adopted directly out of foster. And I'm happy to send any of this. This was my little foster guy, Fletcher, who loves to burrow into things. In foster programs, you have to be very careful. Are your dogs hiding in plain sight? It's very easy for people to say, they're out of the shelter, they're taken care of, they're out there in foster. Don't let them get stuck in the foster parking lot. So why we do it, and this was Trapper. He was a foster of mine, and he was I almost adopted Max, but I knew I wasn't the right home for Max. Trapper I was a little bit more on the fence for. I still kind of felt like maybe I wasn't the best home. I loved him dearly. And I was kind of on the fence, and the adoption counselor said, why don't you just bring him out this weekend, see how things go. Well, of course, Saturday I got a call from her, and she said, the perfect family is here. And she just told me about it. I said, okay, got to let him go. That's all right. I didn't even get to see him. He was at the adoption site. He went home with that family. But I thought I trusted the adoption counselor. Well, the very next morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm pulling up my email and looking at it, and I get this email from Trapper, who they've renamed Max, which I just thought was very cosmic. So I wake up and I get this email. My new adopted mom woke up thinking about you this morning and hoping that you're not missing me too much, and are happy knowing that I'm going to be part of a young family in Central Austin. I'm not 100% sure what to make of this new group, but they have 2 young kids who are going out of their way to shower me with love and affection. The mom and dad are nice too, and sure like having me around. This morning I'm going to get to walk with the boy and girl to school, which should be fun. Then about a week later she emailed me. I'm still sleeping this morning, but my boy just woke up and told his mom, I think we got the best dog ever. And then about a week after that she wrote me, the kids have taken to reading to him every night. Last night, I overheard them hugging him and telling him he's one of the most important people in their lives. As you can tell, we love him. Several times a week, we all sit around talking about how he really is the best dog in the world. Thanks for all that you did to protect him. I overheard Luke telling his friends the other day, Max's foster mom saved his life so that he could wait and join our family. And to me, I share this story because this is why we need foster homes. Foster homes are what get dogs and cats out of the shelters. They go home to a foster. They go home to an adoptive family instead of coming out in a body bag. None of these dogs would have been alive without a foster program. And I think that the other thing that this illustrates is it's not just for the animal. Look what these animals have done to these families. Excuse me, sorry. Oh, gets to me every time. It's been 4 years, but still. So anyway. With that, this is my foster failure. Fletcher is a little 3-legged min pin. As you can tell, yes, I am a Packers fan. And he was the one that finally, I was the person who, apologies to little dog people out there, I loved all dogs, but I didn't really care for the little bitey, barky guys. This guy we had tried and tried and tried to get a foster for him. We finally got one that could take him over the weekend, but his time was up. They literally, Faith called me. This is when I kind of backed off from my involvement with the foster program, or wasn't doing as much in fostering, and she said, can you please take this dog for 3 days? So I talked to my little dog guru. She told me what to do, and I said, okay. I was very nervous. And 2 days later, I was saying, I think I might have to keep this one. So it's go figure. You just never know. Okay, so we have a little time. Questions? Because as Trapper Max says, we're all ears.